I would say like a bunch of new complexities uh were brought to my current thinking regarding climate change from this excerpt. A lot of it was tough to digest, so I'm sure a lot of it went right over my head. I'll honestly reread this week just to kind of try to retain more because kind of some of it I was reading through it. I was like, "Whoa, this is a lot." Probably should have spaced it out over more time so I could digest it better. But yeah, like especially regarding I guess like what we lost in a way, like humans' relations to non-human things as a more than just like a scientific like kind of breaking down the modern scientific barrier between the two. I guess like a physical real relation to the earth versus just like a resource type like oh we're using the earth, we're running out of this resource. I guess his perspective more like we're hurting the earth. Um, I phrased that bad, but hopefully the gist of what I was trying to say got through. Um, and then for number two, identify and summarize at least one specific case study or example used to make an argument in this excerpt of the book. One that stood out for me just from the get go was the example of the carbon dioxide bubble coming out of the lake and killing 1,700 people. It's pretty early on. I think it was on like here I'll check. I think it was like page like 7, I believe. Or no, even earlier. Page 5. It was Lake Nyos. It was in 1988. A great cloud of carbon dioxide burst forth, killing 1,700 people and like countless animals. That was wild to me. That was like I've never heard of that kind of threat before. Never heard of like a carbon dioxide bubble just coming over the lake and killing everyone. Especially my understanding of it would be it'd be like near invisible, so it'd just be like an invisible wave of death bursting out of a lake and killing everything in its path. It's a pretty impactful like mental image. So even though that one was really early on, there's many others. That one definitely stuck with me pretty strong. Just kind of like something out of a movie, just like everything dropping in its path. That was pretty wild to think about. Um, yeah, and that's why it stood out to me, just because it's shocking. And what does it say about Gush's larger points regarding the literary form of the novel? That probably wasn't a great point to relate to the literary form of the novel because that was like a sentence. He had much better points. For a point that relates to the literary form of the novel, another one because I'm just looking at the same area. It would be on page 7, where he talks about how fiction is viewed, or how climate change novels are viewed as fiction by many like book journals, like New York. He laid named like 10. I'll just name two or three. It's like the New York Review of Books, Los Angeles Review of Books, the Literary Journal, New York Times Review of Litigations, and a few others. That was pretty interesting to me, and I think that definitely shows that maybe the literary novel isn't the greatest place to express climate change related ideas and ideology because it shows how poor the reception's been, I guess, or at least it seems a little bit dismissive to write it all off into the science fiction category because it seems kind of like, oh, that's not real, you know. Obviously, I'm sure these journals acknowledge that climate change is real and probably think it's a big problem. It's probably not very intentional. But to me, and I'm sure definitely Go, she probably thinks that it's kind of diminutive and dismissive to move climate change related subjects into the science fiction category. So I think that was a point that was pretty interesting in that regard. And then for number three, why does Ghost choose to end this part of the book with the case study example of Marrakech? I definitely butchered that. In Western Burma or Myanmar. Um, I think just the general context, like built by a fairly ancient, not I mean not really in the grand scheme of things, but an old civilization, a kind of like a monolith to nature is kind of my understanding from his interpretation, and I think forgot the author's name, but the person who wrote How Forests Think, kind of reflecting on the monument, kind of expressing human beings' relations to nature through Buddha and other visual things. I'm going to quickly look it up because I want to see it myself so I can kind of understand it slightly better. Probably an example of where literary form comes up short. Rock you. Sorry, I have to type around my computer here. Yeah, that is amazing. Sorry, getting back to the point. Yeah, it's definitely like a monolith that he seemed to think that it connected your thinking with nature in a way. It was like, I guess, in a spiritual way. Not really spiritual. That's kind of dismissive. But in a more tangible way, I guess. But like a monument to center human connection to nature. I guess the symbiotic relationship. And it's a pretty powerful point and an example of how people in the past seem to have valued that more. So I think that is probably why he ended off that section of the book with that case study. It's just because that setting, environment, and the relationship between those humans, I mean, still us, same humans, but those humans in the world, I could see how that could interest him, because I bet those people probably followed his thoughts about human relationships to the world much closer than your average modern-day scientist did. So I could see how that case study could definitely interest him. And this is one of the main critiques of Ghosh's books, that he largely ignores the genre of science fiction. I'll be one of the genres where I think that it would be a good genre to take up issues of climate change and environmental issues, just because it's like, it's very easy to visualize a future if it's illustrated in a fictional setting for you. There's many books that don't. I think like even Dune to an extent did that for a lot of people. But I also see Ghosh's side where it is kind of dismissive and people are like, oh, that's just fiction. But in other realms, it's been really useful. Like Orwell's 1984 is great for people to show them some values of freedom, like how censorship's really bad and other things. Like whenever there's like a kind of unrelated, but you see like Instagram post that's like something kind of pro-censorship, all the comments are, oh, this is literally 1984 and all this stuff. So I think there's a lot of places where fiction can be beneficial towards your point and in expressing your argument. And he didn't seem to think that it really had any place in expressing his argument. Or even really, it's kind of odd to write a book and have a large part of the book be about, like, books aren't great for expressing this. I don't know. Some of that was just kind of, like, weird to me. But I probably just didn't. Probably went over my head there. But, yeah, I think science fiction and speculative fiction is a really good genre to take up these issues, especially for children. For children, it's really easy. Like, I mean, my generation at least, like, you've seen so many headlines about, like, this climate disaster killed this many people, and you kind of get, like, not necessarily numb to it, but, like, it doesn't really have that much value. And sometimes something that's not even real can have more value to you. Like, a story can stick with you better. Like, when I hear about an earthquake that killed a bunch of people, like, obviously it's very sad and tragic, and I care about it. And I can see that it's, relative to this. Or a heat wave killing these people, I care about it. But the things that I really remember stick with me, especially when I was a kid, I still hear those headlines, I don't remember a single one from when I was a kid, is like a book or a story that kind of relates to that. So I think when you're a kid, it's definitely very beneficial. So I think fiction has a great part in there. And even for adults, it's just a really good medium for expressing things in a slightly, I guess, easier to digest way. But then also I do see his side where maybe it's diluting it a bit. But I do think that science fiction and or speculative fiction can be a good genre to take up issues on climate change and other environmental issues. Thank you.